At Ninepine, we kind of take a global first strategy. So we see ourselves as a global brand rather than a local brand going global. So like, how do we actually do that?
Well, I mean, in terms of a lean and rapid approach, first of all, we don't really, in an early stage, over-optimize for a specific market because we believe that our business has already been optimized to a somewhat generic extent, perhaps, but optimized for acquiring new customers globally. So our focus is very much speaking the right language to the right customer, no matter where they are. We don't really see the geographical boundaries, but we look more for the specific customer type that would resonate with our type of messaging and type of brand we build. So on the note of not overdoing things, we take more of a quick and dirty approach. We launch, what does work in our current markets that are strong. But obviously, we would focus more on, say, the type of ads that are better optimized for being more similar to actual sales pitches. So we can very early on gauge the interest in a market without having overspent both time and other resources to sort of gauge what is the long-term potential of this market.
So even though we see the potential in top of funnel activities, activations, and also, optimizing your website for language and, all that stuff, it's important, but for us, it's not a step 1 or step 2, maybe not even a step 3, really. We try to test our hypotheses on the attractiveness of a market with as low risk and as low investment as possible. And then once a market has proven a baseline stability in terms of like potential, then yeah, we can go into the next stuff to give them more love. So it's a pretty lean, agile approach, no nonsense.
And their approach is pretty much the exact same if we're testing 10 markets at a time, or if we're testing 2 markets at a time, or if it's just expanding into one, exact same method.
So I guess, and one of the, it will take us longer, to mature in certain markets, but we're not out there trying to mature or like build a massive brand in a country with 6 million people or 10 million people. That's not really the agenda, but it does safeguard us from plateauing early if you just focus on a few markets. So yeah, this market expansion is not really our thing. It's more of a global approach to begin with. When we launch into new markets, it's not our aim to build brand awareness or top of mind awareness with the broad, whole country of the whole audience. What we're trying to do instead is we're trying to build an awareness with the 10-20% early adopters, these VIP customers that we're trying to find across the globe. The whole conception of the funnel, top funnel, mid funnel, bottom funnel, with digital these days, it's pretty flat, right? So we believe in this theory of brand performance, right? So there is no trade-off between brand and performance. Traditionally, you would have brand activities to begin with, top of funnel activations, and then you kind of feed in the performance afterwards. We try to do it all at once, right? So with digital, you can. So you can do performance and maybe sales pitch-driven marketing with your brand aesthetic, with your brand values. So we don't do any of this like super brandsy activations, hoping, fingers crossed that this will trickle down into mid-funnel, bottom funnel. But we kind of go straight into a traditional maybe mid-bottom funnel type of direction with our marketing, with the touch of a brand. So that's how we approach it, really. So we kind of skip top funnel.
I think it's very important to point out here that this is not an approach that is for everyone. We have selected this approach because we understand that we're building a business that is, it resonates with a specific maybe type of person or maybe not the whole market. And our product is also not, it could be mass, but it's not so generic that it's super obvious that we need to do this niche. Can't come up with an example, but if you're selling, hand soaps or something, maybe that goes for 80% of the market and maybe your approach should be different. And good for you, you have a huge addressable market. But if you believe in creating long-term value by having a little bit more of a specific look or a specific value proposition, it is likely that by going too broad in the beginning, unless you're looking for data on purpose, you're probably overspending on your top funnel. Our best tips for expanding, if you are a local player, maybe even a local Nordic player. My tip, once again, rooted in my philosophy, but really what I would invite you to do instead of looking at multiple markets and then trying to narrow it down. And I'm sure a lot of these companies will try to do research and decide on one and then build a very sophisticated localization and go-to-market approach for this specific market and hope that it kind of hits home. I would invite you to take all of the prospective markets that you're even considering in the first place and focus on finding the cheapest way possible to assess the market attractiveness in terms of your business fit in all of them at the same time. Get real data and hopefully find one or maybe even more of these markets where you can be profitable from day one without having to invest in a new skill set, new type of organization, or tweaking your current capabilities and core competencies, but rather you can almost copy-paste your current model, move to that market. It's much more fun to launch in a new market if you're profitable from day one. And then with time, you can decide on what else you need to localize and invest into.
Yeah, so one major tip is to not overthink or overinvest in activities when you're launching to a new market that have very questionable ROI. So again, I don't believe there's a point really to translate your website and translate everything before you even know if it's going to fly, right? What's the point of going to a famous person in that country and paying a lot of money to spread your word when the baseline without this peak is probably lower than country XYZ that you haven't tried? So it's a little bit more like doing the quick and dirty approach. You have your hypotheses, do an MVP type of, startup jargon, do an MVP, just launch it, see what you learn, and then take next steps, really.
I would also invite these companies to be very well aware of potential data bias. So what I'm trying to get at is, if you know you've been a local player, let's hypothetically say you're a Danish company, and you've optimized everything for getting repeat purchases from your best customers in Denmark, and your product pages are optimized to, gain the trust and address the potential reservations of future customers in Denmark, and everything is very Denmark. Even your product launches perhaps are influenced by what we'll find in Denmark. I've seen many companies conduct analysis on this and sort of assume that they can copy-paste that to other markets, which is a bit of a naive approach in my opinion. It doesn't mean that you have to look at, say, the UK and be like, how do we tweak this to fit into the UK? But at least be aware of this when using your historical data and trying to figure out the best approach for a new market.
If we just focus on local data, something that flies, to say in Sweden, Stockholm, is not necessarily the same thing that will fly in London or in California, right? So if you optimize your business for Sweden first, and then went to States or Australia, then your product kind of collection catalog may not be the right fit from the get-go. And I guess one little caveat is language is something that comes up quite a lot, when you expand. I know you go to Germany, you need to speak German. You go to France, you need to speak French. There is truth in that, of course. It affects conversion rate. But to us, we do English and everything on purpose because we've managed and tried to manage in multiple language websites. It's difficult. But for us, language is not the words per se. Language for us is the content that's driving traffic. It's the content that it lands on the site. It's how a product page is selling or addressing reservations. That is more important, no matter if it's German or English, than the actual language itself. And if you go onto many e-commerce websites, you land on the product page and it's just some classic catalog pictures and just some white text. White background with black text. Doesn't really do much. Maybe it works if you've already matured in a country like Denmark and you have a high awareness and you're trying to push the last 80% of the potential customers. But is that going to fly when you go stateside, for example? Maybe, but I don't know. Highly unlikely, maybe.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thinking of language beyond just the traditional way.